All righty. So welcome everyone to the Agile Austin Coaching Meetup. If you didn't know where you were, now you do. So let's dive in. What is the mission of Agile Austin? We connect people and foster professional growth through collaborative events, which educate our community on uncovering better ways to deliver value through Agile values, principles, and practices. This is a quick shout out and call out rather to anyone who is interested in being a sponsor. There's a contact info there. Erin and I can give you the info afterwards as well if you're interested, but we can't do this without our sponsors. So super, super important. Also, here's some updated information on what it means to be a member. So the yearly membership fee is $35. That is everything that it includes right there on the slide. And we'd love to have you officially join. So feel free to visit the new fancy website for more info. And then on the next slide, we have our updated board members. If you have any questions, want to get in touch with any of these fine folks, please let us know. They are all incredible people. Super grateful for everything that they do. Yeah, very grateful. And on the next slide, we have a summary of all the different meetups as a part of Agile Austin. I won't read every single word on this slide because it's a lot, but you can go read more and find out more about each one of these at our meetup. And we encourage you to do so. We're obviously the Agile Coaching Meetup, and we meet every Monday of the month. Erin will talk a little bit more about that. Now I will pass the mic to you.
Well, this gives me a perfect ploy. So if anyone knows an Agile product owner in the Austin area, I do know that the product SIG is looking for a new leader. So if this is you, please reach out to Carrie Sudi or anyone on the Agile Austin board, and they will help you make that Agile product SIG a reality. Or if you have other SIGs that you think just need to happen, reach on out. Okay, so the Agile Austin Coaching SIG. We do meet every Monday, or excuse me, the first Monday of every month, except when our meetup falls on a major US holiday, then we go to the second Monday. But our goal here is really to create learning experiences to help Agilists connect with one another and to help build those Agile coaching skills herein. So I'm Erin. You just met Brittany. We've been doing this since about 2017. I hope we've gotten a little bit better each year, but we really, really do love supporting the Agile community and helping these skills to grow. So a little bit more about us, how we're different. You might want to rethink this part of the slide, Brittany. I might collapse these two, just saying. So upcoming events. In October, Damon Poole will be here and he will be talking about everyone can coach or everyone can offer coaching. Damon's an author, an enterprise Agile coach, and he's been doing this for a while. So he'll be coming here to talk about that. And I mentioned earlier that in November of this year, Caitlin Walker will be attending, and she will be leading the discussion around using clean language for coaching and the like. So she is one of the foremost experts on clean language from a coaching perspective. And I think she's about finished with her PhD, but she has, if anyone has not read it yet, From Contempt to Curiosity is really a wonderful book in helping to understand what clean language is and how to use it. In December, Ian Wallace, who is out of the UK as well, apparently it's the all UK autumn, he will be here. Ian does a lot of work around psychology and metaphor and the use of that to help people find new ways to move forward. So once we have that photo and the bio up, we'll get that there as well. But tonight we are very lucky to be welcoming Lisa Bradburn, and she's here to talk about developing your coaching presence. She does a lot of work around Gestalt and that intersection between coaching and psychotherapy. And so with that in mind, I'm actually going to turn things over to Lisa.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for such a warm invitation. I see some familiar faces, which is wonderful. And I know there's some new folks on the call as well. Okay, let me just fire up the presentation. Just give me 1 second and I'll share my screen. I do want to make sure that I'll still be able to see the chat. Hold on a sec. All right. Okay, so share screen. Here we go. And perfect. I also want to make sure I can see the chat. There we go. Awesome. Okay. There, great. All right, so yeah, very nice to be here tonight. I'm going to talk a lot about Gestalt Psychotherapy. So I think, Erin, you've already done a wonderful job of, asking everyone to turn their video on. Feel free at any point in time just to either put a question in the chat. I actually can see you, or just speak up. Let's make this interactive. I know what my voice sounds like, but I also love hearing the voices of others. So it's not just me talking. So yeah, let's have like a two-way dialogue together. Great. Okay, there we go. So yeah, so again, very nice to meet all of you. My name is Lisa. I'll just share a few things about myself. So that's me in the middle. I actually live 2 hours east and a little bit north of Toronto on a lake called Rice Lake in southern Ontario. So I notice you also have Damon Poole, who's going to come and speak at Agile Austin. He's a fellow Torontonian, so really excited to see that more of us are branching out and joining your organization. I also love doing a lot of writing on coaching and psychotherapy on the Medium platform. So always love to engage with people on different topics that I write about. And that little fellow that you see at the bottom left-hand corner, well, that's Aster, my little dog. It's my little buddy, and she's always with me in everything that I do. Pets are very important. And finally, of course, Gestalt Psychotherapy. So I am entering into my 4th year of 5. A very critical year, as I will be starting private practice in November of this year. Yeah, just a couple months away. And on top of that, I also work for the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. I'm moving into an Agile coach role. So very exciting things happening this year. Okay, well, let's do a quick look at our agenda, see what we're going to talk about tonight. So first, I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the background, a bit of the history of Gestalt Psychotherapy. We're going to do a quick little exercise about the fine line between coaching and psychotherapy. There's a lot of interdependencies, a lot of practices that we can borrow from psychotherapy into coaching. We'll look at 3 different exercises as well within this presentation and our time together. And finally, a lot of it will be rooted in mindfulness, looking at the quality of our conversations together between coach and coachee, really staying in the present tense within ourselves and how that mind and body is connected. All very important pieces of Gestalt psychotherapy. And in terms of Gestalt or values and the values that we're going to talk about tonight. So we'll look at maybe some new ways to kind of handle some old challenges. We'll talk about the importance of truth telling. That's very valuable in Gestalt. And of course, looking at how to develop our presence. Okay, so it's a lot of information, but it will all be interconnected and tied together. All right, so let's start off with a question. So what I'd like you to do is just take a moment and read these 2 scenarios. I would like to know from you, and you can either put it in the chat or say it out loud. What role best describes a psychotherapist versus an Agile coach? So let me just give you a moment, read through both, and I'd love to hear what you think.
So Lisa, once we've read it, are you hoping people will just chime in with their response, or do you want them to put A or B? Which would?
Yeah, you can either, if you're a shy person, feel free to put it in the chat, what you think, A or B is, or just say it out loud if you feel you know the answer. I'm happy with either.
The bottom is more in line with Agile coaching, in my opinion.
Okay. I can see.
I think A is more in line with coaching, Agile coaching.
I thought A as
I
well.
choose option C because I could see myself in either.
It's a trap.
Yeah, this sounds like a trick right here. It's like it depends.
Maybe it's both.
I would say both.
Yeah, maybe A and B.
Yeah,
I guess.
really, yeah.
Oh,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Lisa. The only thing I would add is I guess the keyword here at the top is just stress. What type of stress are we talking about? If it's light and not emotional trauma, right? Then I guess I can see where the others are coming from for sure.
Yes. Yeah, well said. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's remove the emotional trauma out of it for a moment. But yes, it is a little bit of a trick question. Both of these scenarios can apply to either coaching or psychotherapy. Yeah. I just wanted to get the neurons firing up this evening. Okay, that's right. So let's dig in a little bit deeper into these though. Okay, here we go. So yeah, there really is a fine line between psychotherapy and Agile coaching. As I said at the top of the presentation, we really can borrow a lot of the work that we do in psychotherapy that leads into Agile coaching, especially, having presence, breath, being in the here and now and really listening to our clients. So all of these are shared. And I know this is a very large kind of slide. What I'm going to do is just focus on a few different items here. Let me just move our chat so I can see a little bit better and the similarities. There we go. Okay. So there are some subtle differences between a psychotherapist and a coach, and then there's some similarities. So I'll just walk you through a few of these, and of course, happy to make this presentation available to all of you after if you want to dig in a little bit deeper. So when we think of psychotherapy, which I'll be entering into, there is of course more talk therapy. It would be, as I think someone just correctly said, you're dealing more with emotional trauma. So bang on that response. Psychotherapists, generally, we don't diagnose clients. That is more within psychology or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Those professions do diagnose. Psychotherapy is more kind of taking sometimes those diagnoses and then working within it to really help alleviate, the stress or emotional issues of our clients. So we kind of work with them sort of post that diagnosis, or even if a diagnosis hasn't been made. Again, where you would see psychotherapy a little bit different than coaching would be, we wouldn't be dealing with those emotional issues. For example, if someone has, challenges with, drugs or alcohol or marital issues, you're not, bringing that in and kind of working one-on-one with clients in the workplace. But within coaching, this is where it's a little bit different. You would have more of that product kind of focus. You'd still have that people focus. But you would still be dealing with, tension and stress of your coachees. But I think the difference here is really the levels, and that is, psychotherapists, you're usually dealing with one-on-one, as I will be. Sometimes, you do have marital counselors, that type of thing, but generally it's more one-on-one. Whereas with coaching, you have the enterprise. As I know a lot of you on the call are enterprise Agile coaches, then you would have maybe that program level, that second tiered level, and then of course the team level. So you wouldn't have that in psychotherapy. And then of course, as I said, you wouldn't be dealing with that personal trauma, but you would be dealing with sometimes organizational conflict. So those I would say are the key differentiators. And then in similarities, and this is where I get really excited, ultimately in especially Gestalt psychotherapy, it's very experiential. We do what I would say like a lot of kind of experiments with clients, trying to, shift people into, new ways of thinking. There's always that sense of play. Like Gestalt psychotherapy really leverages, I say here art therapy, but you see a lot of people that enter into the profession that are from, yoga practice or they're meditators. We have, people who are artists. So there's all different even types from the humanities that come in and are a part of psychotherapy. And I really feel that these experiments are very prevalent in Agile coaching as well. So we borrow a lot from that. So, a lot on this slide, I realize. Are there any questions or comments so far?
I think it is interesting how, even though maybe we're not coaching or influencing on that emotional aspect when you're in the business world, it is interesting how good coaches can kind of see that emotion and see the trouble that comes through in that, kind of personal. And I still think it's kind of important to help go where they are in a sense. But yeah, I feel like there's an interesting intersection there. And also I know it's a fine line when you're talking business versus personal, but all in all, for me, especially, I know that my personal emotion is who I am at work. And I have a hard time dividing those two things. So
yeah,
maybe that's something I need to work on.
or maybe not. I mean, ultimately, I think we want to be our authentic selves and bring our entire self to work. So to separate might even lead into, a state of repression to an extent. So I think it's just having those open and honest conversations, and where to divulge information and where not to. So yeah, it is definitely complex. I appreciate your comment. Okay, anyone else before I move on? All right. So let's continue. There we go. Okay, so yeah, now that we've looked at some of the key differences between a psychotherapist and an Agile coach, in fact, you helped me with your example. I want to ask if anyone else has ever walked that fine line between the two or had any sort of challenges at work. Any other examples?
Oh,
Yeah.
I would say I've had to do this sometimes. I don't think it's really that much different. There was a very emotional situation, you know, family, individual, and I'm like, yeah, this person needs some different help than what I'm able to get as a coach. But it did encourage me to go get a few different credentials so that I wouldn't be so out of my league when that happened the next time.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's important to note what capabilities are in your toolbox and maybe where it's a bit more challenging and being able to articulate that. And in your example, Erin, you really took the bull by the horns and went out and educated yourself. So I think it's having the presence and having the understanding of what you know is in your wheelhouse versus maybe what's something a bit more challenging, and just being upfront and honest about that. And to me, that's a sign of maturity.
At least, in fact, that's one of the reasons that I thought this was a great topic to bring to the Agile coaching meetup, was because I think as coaches, we need to know where that line is between coaching and therapy. And we need to be mindful of it and not cross it unless that we have the credentials, we have, you know, the full knowledge, certification, backing, assessment, continuing ed, the whole 9 yards. I think that's really important to know the difference between the two.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's just, again, saying, calling it out, coachy, I appreciate where you're coming from. I see the pain. I feel the emotion that is, within you. While I may not be able to help you with your personal challenges, may I suggest, either speaking with a family member or, seeking out external counseling.
Yeah.
You can do that careful kind of suggestion. I wouldn't recommend, because that's not our place, but kind of a careful offering. And then you just sort of have to leave that to an extent. But I think the first thing is acknowledging both the pain of the other and then what is within our wheelhouse and what is not. Okay. All right. And so again, there's a lot of really beautiful similarities when I think about practitioner qualities with an Agile coach and a psychotherapist. And I find that a lot of us are, naturally empathetic towards the other. If we weren't in the business of working with people, we probably wouldn't be coaches. So a lot of it is, of course, holding that space. I love this one, and it's patience. I know sometimes it can be challenging, and it is, the old cliche, patience is a virtue, but is something that, is developed over time. It's not something that usually just comes immediately. I think some of the best Agile coaches and psychotherapists that I've encountered are self-aware. So if you don't have that self-awareness, that's when you can easily lead into either recommending or, maybe delving a little deeper into that personal trauma that we shouldn't maybe go there. I think great coaches and psychotherapists know what their trigger points are. And I'll give a quick example of this. So for me, I'm adopted. I know my personal trigger is abandonment issues. So when I've worked with clients in the younger years at Gestalt Psychotherapy, I've noticed, oh, this is their trauma and this is my trauma. And sometimes they kind of bump up against each other. So again, it's knowing what is mine and then what is owned by the other, and that dividing line really makes conversations flow so much more easily, because I'm able to then self-manage and know how to respond back to the other in an appropriate way, rather than me getting uber emotional about it and bringing my own stuff in. And I think sometimes as coaches, we all have triggers as well. Maybe it is that person who on the team just wants to be always that, that helper, or no, there's a lot of different triggers that can come up. So I think knowing what those are is probably such a core skill for either profession. we all know deep curiosity and active listening are super important as well. I think that, again, these can take years of experience though, especially deep curiosity for others that we may not understand well or know really where they're coming from. That can be challenging at times, or if they're just maybe very different from us. So it's taking the time to really get to know people and ask those deeper kind of questions. Okay. So yeah, I guess, does anyone have any examples of like a personal trigger they're aware of? I know that's a heavy loaded question if you want to disclose. If not, I'll move on.
I don't have an example of a personal trigger, but I have found that much like in therapy, like building trust with the team is like so important. Just like a therapist has to build trust with their clients, like teams work better if, you know, there's trust between the scrum leader and the team and amongst the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that I'm actually surprised I don't have that bullet on here. Thank you. I think that's absolutely necessary. And that's a foundational building block. That certainly does take time as well. I think that when we add in these qualities as either a psychotherapist or a coach, my hope is that that would, you know, come with time. So especially if we know ourselves really well and how we approach the others, I think that that would inherently build those blocks. So thank you. I'm glad that you mentioned that. I actually will add that bullet in here as that foundational piece.
Lisa, for me, I will identify in terms of a personal trigger that I will have. And if I'm working with a team, because I've worked in the IT industry for so long, I always have the feeling of kind of being, you know, helping women to promote their voice a bit more. So it's kind of that thing where Spring mentioned, you kind of find it hard to sometimes separate that. And I kind of become an advocate for, like, sometimes I see the females on the team not necessarily being as vocal, or if they have really good ideas, taking like a bit of a step back. So I might have a bit more of a preoccupation to helping them vocalize a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fascinating one. And it might be just finding different ways. Maybe it isn't always just simply speaking up, but it could be through, you know, gestures on camera. It might be, you know, in a chat, kind of behind the scenes. So it's really seeing where each person is at. It's a beautiful place that you're in, because like that's such a worthwhile cause. And it sounds like you're championing, trying to promote the voices of other people, in particular females. Okay, that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. All right, so before we move into the next section, which will be 3 different exercises, we're just going to quickly recap. So as I said a little earlier, you know, psychotherapists, yes, they do, you know, work with groups at times, but the majority of the time it is one-on-one, unless you're heading into kind of marital counseling and things like that. And obviously the focus is more on the mental health aspect. Whereas coaching has those 3 kind of levels that I identified, and that's the enterprise, program, and team. So I always also, I didn't mention this a little earlier, but I also think of an Agile coach as working both vertically and horizontally within the organization. And of course, we looked at the different relational aspects and similarities between the 2 professions. Okay, so let's dive into Gestalt Psychotherapy in particular. As we were coming into this call, I heard some people talking a little bit about, hey, I've heard of this Gestalt thing, but so let me just pause. What do you know about Gestalt psychotherapy today? Again, either say it out loud or put it in the chat, whatever works best for you. I think a few people have heard of it. Okay, well, that's all right. I'll continue then. So let me just go to the next slide. So, and Erin, this one is for you. You were mentioning how you love pronouncing Gestalt.
Fun, it is fun.
It is. I've heard many different variations, but how we pronounce it within our school is Gestalt. So it has a bit of a g and a sh in it. So Gestalt is the right pronunciation. Yes, it is German. There you go. There's my little video of it, or recording. I'm trying to get to the next slide. Okay, so one core component about Gestalt that's super important is the mind-body connection. So Gestalt simply means the sum of all parts equals the whole. So if you did a direct translation from German to English, that's what it means. And I think it's very applicable within the psychotherapy context, because you do see some modalities that just strictly focus on the mind. I think a lot of psychiatry, some psychology, it's very much of the focus on the brain and what's happening, which is super important. But Gestalt focuses on the whole. So, for example, when we think about that mind-body connection, when I think about when I'm stressed, as an example, it's not just happening in a bit of a frenetic activity, but I also feel it in my body. I feel an energy. I feel kind of a tapping of the toe, or maybe some movement in my hands, or some, maybe my heart rate starts to accelerate in a stressful situation. So really, it's looking at that physicality. I even take it one step further. Not everyone does, but I also think of, that added component of our spirit as well. So when we do work in Gestalt, it's not just from the mind, but it's really looking at the entire person. And that's where mindfulness is an important factor. Okay. So I just spoke a little bit about it, but when I think about Gestalt, let me just move this here. There we go. And what it is. So under the umbrella, so Gestalt is one type of psychotherapy practice. I think there's about 40 or 42 of them in total, and it is one of many. So to me, Gestalt is like that base layer. I'm a downhill skier. To me, that's the very first layer that I like to work within, and then add kind of other tools in the toolbox on top of that. So we talked about that holistic approach already with the mind-body connection, and really having or promoting an awareness of where we are and what we're sensing and feeling at all times. And when we look at the key, one differentiator about Gestalt that I think is super important, and that is the focus on the here and now. So again, some modalities on maybe what's happened in the past. You might talk a lot about what happened in childhood, or maybe look at significant time points within your life. Well, with Gestalt, we honor that. We look at what happened in your past. However, the difference is we look at how is it impacting you today, right now, in this very moment. So if I use that example about adoption, and abandonment issues, then for me, I look at, well, how was that informing maybe if I didn't receive a phone call that I had expected, or what if I didn't get that job opportunity, or how is it actually impacting me? And then how is it tied back to that original moment in time? So I'm kind of doing an interplay of looking at my past, but always bringing it into the present tense and where I'm experiencing it and feeling it in my body. Okay, and then of course, Gestalt is very much relational. So it's looking at, what is the client bringing into the session, as well as how am I relating to that as well? How am I responding to it, and what is coming up for me? So it's not just all about the client, but it's really about the two in relationship together. And I think coaching also, when we bring self-awareness into the field, I think it's a very beautiful dynamic. It's not always a one, it's about two. And then finally, when you practice Gestalt, you're always a student. So if, God willing, if I live to 100, I'll still be a student of Gestalt. It'll be an ongoing process. You never finally arrive. You're always learning and discovering, which I think is also the beauty of Agile coaching as well. That's just my take. There's always something to discover. Okay, any questions so far?
This seems really similar to somatic coaching.
Yes. Yeah, I would say the somatic approach is very much ingrained within Gestalt. So absolutely. Can you tell me a little bit more about the somatic coaching part, though? Is that different than Agile coaching? I'm maybe just a little bit more context.
Yeah, it's just another style. It's like, okay, you want to go down the path of professional coaching. And then one key component is seeing the whole person and getting in touch with the body and with the physical aspects and the mental aspects. And it seems like the difference is, okay, you're not going to deal with trauma or kind of things that are like in the past right there with somatic coaching.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to dive in a little deeper on that. That it sounds very similar.
Yeah, very holistic approach.
Yeah.
So Lisa, you work within a discipline as well? Do you mind?
Yes. So, Gestalt would be considered a discipline or a modality. So I would start with that. But I think the difference between where I work and then maybe the somatic coaching would be we would actually go into those trauma responses. We would go a little bit deeper and do some experimentation and really look within. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
What do you mean by experimentation? Or is that going too deep?
No, that's a good question. So let's see. Even some of the experiments that we're going to look at tonight, there's 3, would be like I'm jumping ahead a little bit, like empty chair, for instance, would be a really good experiment that we'll look at. Really, it's getting people a little bit out of their comfort zone to maybe look at their situation from a different light. Role playing is really a big component within Gestalt psychotherapy as well. So as an example, if I was going to, sit with a therapist, a Gestalt therapist, and work on maybe a challenge with about my dad, I might role play and actually become the voice of my father, and then see how it impacts me personally. So there's a lot of different ways that you can experiment and kind of get out of that comfort zone.
That sounds like what you almost do in ORSC for organizational relationship coaching and deep democracy. We're speaking in the voice of either ghosts from the past, people that aren't even there, people that are there. So I think all of this is interconnected.
It is. They all, Yes, I think the difference, what I'm seeing to date, is that sometimes it's just packaged a little bit differently, or maybe slightly different language used. But I ultimately think that the core principles and values seem very much the same. Now, I haven't studied.
Agree, Lisa.
Yeah. What's that?
I said I would agree. I think they're all just one big web. We all just.
Absolutely. I think so too. But ORS could be an interesting one to study. I haven't gone there yet. I'm about to take coactive coaching. So I think in that, I'll be kind of honing my ears and looking for pieces of where I see the similarities as well. And different paths up the mountain. Absolutely. Oh, Gregory, you said, do they still talk about Barry Stevens in Gestalt circles? I don't know. That's a great question. I'm going to take that one away and take a look. I know that there has been some evolution, some modernization of Gestalt since especially the 60s and 70s. So that would be interesting to look at.
I was just curious. Barry Stevens was big in the 70s, and I actually knew her son, who was Jono Stevens, and changed his name to Stephen Andreas, and he was big in the NLP world.
Write that name down. Barry Stevens.
I think she studied with Fritz Perls.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look at that. All right, so here's a really quick experimentation then. And I also, I know we're chatting a lot, so do keep me honest in terms of time.
We've got about 19 minutes. We can go over a little bit. Yeah, we're about 20 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. All right, so here's just a really quick somatic experiment. When you look at this picture, I guess, what emotions come up in your body if you've encountered a ferocious looking dog? Where you've got some fear, caution. Is there a place in your body that you feel this? Trey, this one is laughter. It's a small dog. Yeah, upper body tense.
This is one where you may have that like knee jerk reaction where you actually want to kick. If you were actually there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the fear factor. It's, let me actually go to the next slide here. So it's perhaps shortness of breath or heart palpitations. Or even accelerated breath. It's, experiencing that present moment kind of gut initial reaction, fight or flight. A lot can come to mind. So, yeah, and I think within Gestalt, when we look at it holistically, it's really looking at what you're experiencing in that present moment, as I've said, making sure you're aware of those feelings so that you can make an informed decision. Like if you encounter a ferocious dog like that, what can you do while you're allowing those emotions to occur? They're natural feelings. You don't necessarily want to push them away. You want to experience it, but what do you do within that?
Walk away.
If you can. Yes.
Or run away.
Exactly. All right. I'm going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to just keep going. Okay. And so the next one, if we look at Gestalt as real physical beings, just a little bit of theory to start. I think sometimes we forget that, oh my goodness, yeah, I'm actually more than just my brain, especially if you're working, like me and in a corporate environment for the last 20 years, and I rely so much on my brain. Sometimes when I'm sitting on video calls, I actually forget about my body and what is going on below the head because everything's happening up here. And so one aspect that, especially now working in Gestalt and mindfulness, that I'm trying to integrate is, while I'm sitting on video calls, acknowledging and bringing the two together. It does take a practice. It's not something that happens overnight, especially if you are a very intellectual person. And as I said earlier, knowing that when you have those thoughts and feelings, or sorry, when you have thoughts, they are actually connected to our feelings inside. And when we acknowledge those and speak out, that is actually talking about our inner truth. So I think that's super important, to be vulnerable and express how we are really feeling in any given moment in time. Maybe just even within ourselves. Okay, so this is a very simple exercise and something that I've actually done with the teams that I work with in a heated moment, or in times where we just need to have a breath, like within a retro, or sometimes, you know, when we have some challenges speaking with an individual who might be under a lot of stress. I find this is helpful. It's just strictly knowing that our screens are two-dimensional, but yet we are three-dimensional people. A lot of us have that, either a hybrid work situation, or we've been working online for the last 18 months. So sometimes it's important to actually move your eyes away and acknowledge your environment. Taking breaths will actually recenter, as simple as it sounds, bringing back your physical self and doing that connection of mind and body. It's something that I've actually been working with my clients, both in the corporate realm and even in the therapy setting, and that is just simply breathing. Even right now in this moment, just taking a deep breath, as easy as it sounds, is just simply remembering it, and then exhaling out, and then looking in my environment, because it actually brings me back to myself. What I've done as well on retros is I've just got people to stand up and stretch. Now I know these are very basic things. And even just picking an object within the environment and taking a look at it and kind of coming back. So again, this is not revolutionary, but I think we have a tendency as human beings to simply forget about these things. And once we implement them within ourselves and with our teams, I think it makes for a richer experience. So I'm wondering if any of you have, just tried any of these really simple techniques with any of your clients and what the outcome was.
Oftentimes, if I'm doing a coaching session with someone in the middle of a workday, one of the first things that we do together is just take, a few deep breaths together to really get centered and to like hook in here before we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And these don't have to be reserved for the therapy session or within like psychotherapy or psychology. We really, as Agile coaches, can integrate this, as Erin just said, into our coaching practice. And it might make a big difference. Yeah, I see some items in the chat here, but good ideas. I do that often before starting. Yeah, Javier, that's interesting. Have you noticed a difference when you didn't do it versus now that you do the practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you are in the middle of the workday, for example, if you're not kind of using this exercise of breathing or connecting with your feet, for example, it's something that I do very often. It's like the person cannot find the answer to what they are looking for. And sometimes I use it in the middle of the session as well. When they are kind of very mental, I ask them to connect with their bodies and feel the temperature of their legs, etc. So they can come back to their bodies and connect with the emotion, especially. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. You are already within that embodied experience. That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah. I mean, in Argentina, there is this this umbrella of coaching that it's ontological coaching. I don't know if you heard about it, that it's including the 3 areas of people. It's body, mind, and language as well. So we are taking into consideration the 3 aspects of the self, and probably that's why. And I think it's very it's something that we took from the Gestalt as well.
Okay, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think where we can sometimes forget about these techniques, especially if we've come into Agile coaching as a subject matter expert, and we're really good with a certain aspect of working within the corporate realm, but it may not come from this modality. So I think that's why it's always good to kind of start with this and to remember these simple techniques go a long way. Okay, so yeah, we have, I think, a couple more exercises we'll quickly take a look at. So again, just a quick recap. We've talked a lot about that mind-body connection. Javier just gave a great example of that, and how conflict situations can actually be diffused or at least lessened when we do those simple activities. Okay, so Gestalt as truth telling. So when we talk about truth telling, we're really referring to speaking truth to ourselves first. And I think a lot of that is that acknowledgement that we've just been talking about in the last slides. So with that mind-body connection and self-awareness, knowing what's happening internally within you, whether or not you express that to others is actually a form of truth telling. I think when we tend to cut off or we forget to include both, we're kind of just living in our head, and that is a separated state. What I also try and do is share the impact of the words, like Javi, you just mentioned about language. I'm trying to improve my truth telling just by sharing the impact that when words are spoken to me and how I feel that, regardless of if they know Gestalt or not. And I think that really helps to improve the quality of the interactions that I'm having, because it brings in a level of transparency and vulnerability. So it's almost like a cultivation within yourself and the truth of self. Okay, so I know this is a little bit more advanced, and I think, Erin, you might be familiar with the empty chair exercise. I see you're nodding your head. Although we're not going to do it tonight as a group, I'll just quickly go over it. And again, if it's something you ever want to try out, I'm always more than happy to give a little bit more information or help guide you. And this is very classic Gestalt. It's been around for quite some time. I think it originated in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. So it's an approach where you do role playing. So essentially, you can either do this exercise when you're all together in person, or I think you can even modify it for online and have a Zoom call where you have just an empty chair come in. So let me give an example of how you could use this. So let's say you have a team that's having, maybe a challenge with either, with another team or maybe a certain individual. You could actually do a role-playing exercise where you place either that other team or that person in the chair. And you sit across from it. And then you would envision what it would be like having a communication or a role-playing communication with the empty chair that embodies the team or the person that you have that challenge with. And really kind of feel that emotion that comes up with inside yourself. It's a great way to role play and at least experience what that conversation would be like to try and resolve the issue, maybe even before you physically are actually have that real world conversation. So as an example, I'll use one from therapy. So I had empty chair experience where I had to sort out a challenge I have with my dad. So I used the empty chair, placed my imaginary dad there, and then sat as Lisa and had a conversation with my dad. And then I went and sat in the chair and role played and pretended to be my dad, and then had a response back to Lisa. So it's just a really great way to kind of sort out my own emotions, thoughts, and feelings and process it before I actually went and entered into that real world conversation. So again, a little bit more advanced, but it's really good for conflict resolution and sorting out kind of internal thoughts, feelings, and emotions. You could, in theory, do this in a coaching practice. You don't necessarily have to be a therapist to do this. Okay, so let's see. Nick, you're saying here, my therapist has done a similar exercise. Yeah, writing a letter to someone and not deliver it. It's very similar to that. That's right.
In the ORSC world, this is the third entity exercise where they do that.
Mhm.
And then kind of yep.
Ray's special microphone is not functioning as advertised.
Yes. Okay, so I heard this also is ORSC, but perhaps repackaged as well, a little differently. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Aha, yet again, we see it again. Okay, so let's, oops. Yeah, so again, that's just another tool you can add to your toolbox. This is a really great exercise, especially if you are feeling maybe a little bit of fear before you have a conversation, or maybe you never have that conversation. Maybe it's just a way to process emotions. That is totally fine. I like this second bullet. It's just a good way to try on what it would be like to actually embody the voice of another person. And I know from my own personal experience, just embodying my dad in that therapy session, I really saw some fresh perspectives in feeling what it was like to have his voice. And I never would have done that in a normal kind of setting. So that was very helpful. And yeah, again, it can be used to de-escalate heated situations. Okay, and then last one. So this is, I think, my favorite, and that is really looking at the quality of our interactions with others. Let me move this. Yeah, so in everything that we do within Gestalt, because once again, being very much rooted in mindfulness, it is looking at how we communicate with others. So Javier, kind of going back to what you were saying about language, and then, bringing my full self to work, and how do we meet people and still be authentic in ourselves. And it's looking at how we will, actually, I'm going to show you an example of how we can communicate and bring out the fullness of our discussions. So let me share this with you. I'm not sure if you've seen this one before, but it's an intentions exercise. And I might actually have to go to my notes for a second. I confess I didn't have my notes in front of me. I'm just sort of going off the hip tonight a little bit. So I might have to just pluck some of my notes here to make sense of this. So essentially what we want to do is look at an authentic way that we can communicate with one another. So in our coach and coachee kind of relationship. And also this is a great way to take responsibility of our own actions. So I'm gonna just end the show for a second and go into my notes. So what we want to do is pick one of these bullets. I have to, I choose to, I can't, I won't, I need, I want, I'm afraid to, I'd like to. So if you pick one of those, I'm going to pick the first one, I have to, I choose to. And sorry, I know it's a little unorthodox, but here we go. I'm just going to share my example with you. Okay, so looking at our language, and Javier, I hope you appreciate this one. If I look at, I have to, think about this. So I have to coach someone who is resisting my assistance. I have to speak with a difficult client tomorrow. I'm feeling that heaviness as I'm talking. I have to manage the work of someone who is not pulling his weight. It seems very kind of authoritative or just heavy. And when I think about what's happening in my body, when I say these examples, it's just sort of I feel a heaviness on my shoulders. It doesn't feel like a pleasant experience for me. But if I reorient my language, let me just go to my examples here. When I look at now, I choose to, I'm actually putting more power into my decision-making process. And I'm looking at a more desirable effect and impact. So I'm going to use the first one. I choose to coach someone who is resisting my assistance and seek to understand the person better. Or I like the next one. I choose to speak with a difficult client tomorrow with the goal of finding a new solution. And then the third one, I choose to manage the work of someone who's not pulling his weight and will communicate my challenge with him. Yeah, so it's the same challenge, but yet it's a different choice of words. And the impact of that on my body as I was speaking, I feel more uplifted. I feel like I have more power in my words. I feel more empowered. I'm even leaning forward. So it's fascinating how words really change the dynamic. And as it says at the top of here, it really would then change the quality of our interactions with the other as well. Because now we're bringing ourselves into the conversation differently. And I see some items in the chat. So, whoops, let's see what you're saying here. So I wonder how a Gestalt approach and exercises would work in a cross-cultural context. Western societies are already familiar and comfortable with these sorts of concepts in some manner. That's true. I think that especially in terms of mindfulness, to me, that even goes into like Eastern cultures as well. I know Gestalt really welcomes all different cultures and influences. But I'm wondering too if some of these exercises could even be reoriented towards different cultures and what the outcome of that would look like.
So I'm curious, I'm thinking that also we had that comment about psychological safety and trust with the team at the very beginning. And I'm wondering if that would tie in here with this exercise and helping that to move across cultural boundaries. I think Slade had a comment above Wen's as well. There was a question.
Yeah, let's see.
He is asking, are you suggesting that we use the techniques to better understand ourselves or that we use them in a coaching session?
I think both, to be honest. So I think that you definitely can, especially the mindfulness exercises that we saw with the screen exercise that really brings presence to yourself. And then the honesty of that mind-body connection and the reorienting of yourself. I think it's important to come in first with a ground and your feet firmly planted on the soil or the ground. So That way you can have more of an authentic conversation with your clients. And then when you do these exercises with them, if they are applicable to your situation, you're doing it really from a place of honesty. So I guess the answer to is both. Focus within yourself first, and then, in the right context, you could use these exercises. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Let's see here. So using this language, it's totally making yourself accountable. You choose so that you are the one to blame. Yes, I agree. It really is about taking personal responsibility, which is a building block or a foundation of Gestalt. And Nick, you said that you love embodying these items to coach. Yeah, absolutely.
And Lisa, just a heads up, we're running a little behind, so we're over at this point.
Okay, we're now actually wrapping up, so that's perfect timing. How was 2 more minutes? Does that work?
That I think works great.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, just to do a quick debrief then, if you do choose to do the exercise we just looked at, it's really asking your clients if they have the ability to take control of their choices. And when we shift our own perspectives, we definitely can experience even an embodied change within ourselves. So again, it's all about choice, personal power, and possibilities. Okay, so we looked at 3 different exercises. We looked at the screen exercise. Again, as I said, very, very simple, but I think as humans, we just tend to forget to do it. So it's just that gentle reminder. We looked at the empty chair exercise, which is a little bit more advanced, but something you can really bring in from psychotherapy to use in a coaching situation. It's really great to try on the voice of the other and have conversations, especially when they're very difficult. And then finally, that intentions exercise that we just looked at for personal and team empowerment. Okay, and then if we move on, so when we conclude, we're looking within the Gestalt practices that we can bring into coaching, and that's the focus on the here and now, and where are we today? Really bringing in practices of mindfulness, of being truth tellers, not only to ourselves, but to others, and then have fun as well. I think that it's not a bullet on here, but ultimately, I think with a lot of these exercises, they don't have to be regimented, they don't have to be prescripted. I think especially as we gain experience, it's just fun to try them out and see what works best for us and with our teams. Okay, so if you want to learn a little bit more about Gestalt, there are organizations all over the world, really started out in Germany, but has, and it's actually very big in Europe. It is definitely making much more greater inroads within the last 20 years in North America. In Canada, I belong to the Gestalt chapter in Toronto, but you'll also see here on the right-hand side, tons of representation in the US. Okay, and then of course, got to do a shout out. I'd love, as Erin can attest, I do love using LinkedIn and love reading the work of others, but also do love writing about these topics on Medium. So feel free to add me. And as I said, it's reciprocal. I'll always read and comment on your work as well. We are one community and here to support each other. I forgot about this. Okay, and last of all, if you are a writer, we are always looking for stories on the Luminous platform as well. So we do have myself and another gentleman named Mark Boyson. We write about coaching, and we're always looking for people to join us. That is my final shout out, and thank you very much. I really enjoyed our conversation tonight.
Thank you, Lisa. That was wonderful. And I must confess, you have some extraordinarily beautiful photography on those slides there. Really, was that all you, or was that someone else who took them? Because I'm like, wow, I need to go wherever you're going.
Okay, so that's a paid Shutterstock account. That is not my photography, and I love the color purple. So I was just trying to have like a good look and feel, like your beautiful branding.
Well, Agile, we did a lot of work on Agile last time to get that in there. But any questions that we did not cover that you want to reach out and ask with Lisa?
Yes, may I?
Please.
Yeah, so Lisa, I love Gestalt, right? I've studied it quite a bit. And I look at, when you come from a psychotherapy, a lot of the exercises are geared towards the individuals. However, when we're in Agile, our client is either the team or the organization. And if we focus on the individual, we're now sub-optimizing and bifurcating our effectiveness. How are you proposing that the Agile coach applies this to their work as a team or organizational coach, as opposed to applying the exercises from an individual therapist point of view?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I think back even to like the empty chair exercise as one example, where if you did that as a team, you could actually place, another team in that empty chair and have a dialogue with them, with your team itself. So it doesn't just have to be, so you can modify these psychotherapy exercises to make them more applicable to a larger group dynamic. I even think about self-regulation when I'm on difficult calls with senior leaders, or giving maybe a challenging presentation, or giving the truth, being that truth teller to people that maybe don't want to hear it. I always start with the self and the self-regulation, the breathing. I bring in those personal techniques within myself first, so that way when I am engaging with others, it is more of a diffused stance, but also I think that through how I show up will impact how others react to me as well. And it could be even in that group dynamic. So there's a few different ways of looking at it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Anyone else before I turn everyone loose for the evening? Well, Lisa, again, thank you. It was lovely having you. And thank you for battling the wilds of Toronto to come do this with us. That was great. So everyone, we will be back next month, the first Monday of October, with Damon Poole, who will be talking Everyone Can Offer Coaching. So there'll be a great chance for everyone to practice their powerful questions again. But with that being said, Brittany, are we good? We cover everything tonight?
I think we're good to go.
Okay. Well, y'all, Brittany will be sending out a survey to attendees because, like you all, we really do love feedback and would like more of it on how we can help to improve this meetup. But that being said, I will get the recording hopefully up and posted tonight, and that will be posted on LinkedIn. You can see it up there on YouTube. All right. Lisa, thanks. Brittany, thanks. And we'll see y'all next month. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everyone. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.